Backslide by Black K. Cat. Chapter 13. Perception. Iruka comes home to find all the lights on in his apartment. He lets himself in with a resigned sigh, sets his bag down by the door, and then makes his way towards his bedroom. As expected, there's a big lump of genin flopped out on top of the covers. Studying the man, Iruka gives in with a faint roll of his eyes. He tugs off his chunin vest, takes off his hitaya, and nudges Kakashi over to the right a little more before sprawling next to him. He rolls onto his back, studying the plain white ceiling for a long moment, and then says, "You know, if I were dating someone, they'd get entirely the wrong idea about this. You look like your lover cheated on you, not like you ran headfirst into the brick wall of your emotions." Kakashi doesn't move, the arm draped over his eyes, which is unusual. Most of the time, the damage isn't so bad as to keep him from making eye contact, or at least not anymore. Bouts like that are reserved for his Anbu days. He just hums softly in acknowledgement, and though he looks relaxed, Iruka has known him long enough to recognize the bewildered tension in the set of his shoulders, the near panicky slant to the mouth hidden under the ever-present mask. There's no other sound, no indication of what's happened to send him spiraling into the uncharted territory of feelings. Realizing that whatever conversation takes place here, the majority of it will be up to him, Iruka strangles another sigh, resigns himself to babbling, and says, "Did you know that Naruto came to see me today after my shift at the missions desk? He said that newfound cousin of his is teaching him sealing, and that he's already learned to make sealing scrolls and explosive tags with varying effects." I'm not sure whether to be happy or horrified. It's not exactly the best news for the village, but I remember the unit we did on sealing in class. Naruto's test came back with a picture of a frog on it and nothing else. Kurama-san must be a very good teacher to dump all that information into Naruto's head so quickly. It's subtle, but Iruka catches the faint twitch at the mention of Naruto's cousin, and the even more blatant one at his name. This has something to do with the other Jonin, then. There's silence as Iruka considers what he knows, his old intelligence training coming back. Iruka has never been much of a frontline fighter, but he's a good spy when he has to be. So Kurama has done something to make Kakashi think about emotions and feelings, has pushed him clear out of his usual routine of porn, training, missions, repeat. From what he remembers of Kurama, it's unlikely to be exceedingly traumatic, if only because the redhead is polite enough not to mentally scar his colleagues without a good reason. And as aggravating as Kakashi can be, he also knows when to stop pushing. "I can hear you thinking." Kakashi lifts his arm and gives Iruka a sardonic glare. "Stop it! I came here to wallow." Iruka rolls his eyes right back. "No, you came here because somewhere in that twisted mind of yours, you understand that you need the more complex emotions that usually get shoved to the back and ignored, and you want me to help you deal with them." Kakashi doesn't deny it, which might as well be confirmation with him. He drops the arm and clasps his hands on his stomach, gaze trained on the ceiling like it's the most fascinating thing he's ever seen. Iruka studies him again, more carefully this time. There's no outward indication of what's wrong, and it's likely that no one else would ever even guess that something is wrong. Kakashi hides things well, after all. All Anbu do. Genma does it as well, smiles and laughs and acts normally even when stress and unhappiness and guilt are all tearing him apart inside. And then, out of the blue, Kakashi says, "Did you ever have a crush on Genma?" Iruka chokes. Kakashi continues, ignoring the hacking, wheezing Chunin next to him. "It would be reasonable, right? He's handsome, and he appeared out of nowhere and completely changed your life, and he's very kind." "I never had a crush on Genma!" Iruka shrieks, bolting upright and only belatedly remembering that it's almost 10 o'clock at night and his neighbors are home. Forcibly dragging his voice a few decibels down the register, he takes a careful breath and then explains clearly as though to a child, "I was 10, Kakashi. While Genma is certainly good-looking and definitely kind, he stepped right into the shoes of my mother, which would have made something like that a little awkward and vaguely incestuous." The Jonin looks like he's drooping. "You mean never?" Iruka casts back through his memories and shakes his head. "No, he affirms, and then, catching the faint wilting of Kakashi's expression, sighs, relinquishes all claim to dignity, and tacks on, Hana. She's the one I had a crush on. As expected. That makes Kakashi brighten immediately, something wicked crossing his face. Inuzuka, Hana. She always beat me at spars. Iruka hisses, feeling his face flush crimson. And she was really strong. I thought she was cool. Kakashi pauses for a moment, expression going distant again. That was enough? He asks, just thinking she was cool? Her strength? Well, her generous, acids didn't really hurt either. Iruka thinks a little guiltily. School teacher or not, he's still male. But rampaging demons couldn't drive that out of him, especially in the current company, so he simply nods. For a long minute, Kakashi just stares at him. Then, with a huff of breath, he sits up and says, I almost kissed Kurama. What? Iruka demands, almost falling off the bed in shock. He thinks back to Kakashi's description of Genma. Handsome. And he appeared out of nowhere and completely changed her life. And he's very kind. And realizes that the same could be said of Kanda Hazuno's Jonin. He's certainly changed Naruto's life at least. And from what Kakashi has mentioned in passing, he's helped turn Team 7 from a gaggle of children eternally at odds into an actual team. Surely that's enough of a change to count. And the man's unquestionably pretty, while gentle is the very first word Iruka would use to describe him if asked. Taking a deep breath, Iruka wrenches himself back under control. Almost? He asks. You mean you didn't go through with it? Kakashi frowns faintly, just barely visible beneath his mask, and it only then because Iruka is looking for it. It's complicated. Why am I not surprised? Iruka mutters, dragging his palms over his face. With Kakashi, it could hardly be anything else. The Jonin shoots him an aggrieved look. Kurama was running from Anko and ended up in my apartment to hide. She would have sensed a hint or genjutsu, but you can't see past my couch from the window, so... Iruka holds up a hand and closes his eyes in resignation, already getting the picture. And what would make someone leave you alone, like walking in on two people going at it? Kakashi nods like this is entirely reasonable. Maybe insane is the vital piece Iruka is missing that keeps him from making Jonin. She couldn't see Kurama, so I thought it would work, and Kurenai certainly thought it was real. Poor Kurenai, Iruka thinks with a wince. Whatever her slightly ambiguous relationship with Anko, though granted, all relationships seem slightly ambiguous where Anko is involved, she's constantly getting dragged into things. And Kurama-san reacted badly? He thanked me for helping him, said it wasn't me, it was him. But he looks like he was going to cry. Iruka thinks back to Kurama's smile that night when they walked together. The redhead had talked about his former sensei and the look in his eyes. Resignation and grief and loss, all mixed up together. The rumors, he said hesitantly. I heard he's from Izushio Gakure. Kakashi blinks, like he's not entirely certain as to the reason for this line of thought, but nods. Iruka rolls his eyes at the man's obtuseness where anything even vaguely emotional is involved. And the Saitame thought it would be good to give him a genin team? Then he probably lost everyone, he says, feeling a flare of sympathy for the redhead, who can still be so astonishingly kind, even when his world likely ended around him. Family, friends, a lover? He lost them all, had nowhere to go, and was forced to wander. But he's finally settled here, building another home, and suddenly he can have a relationship with someone. Maybe he just feels guilty, Kakashi. The silver-haired Jonin looks away, but his expression is thoughtful. He lost everyone too, Iruka knows. His entire world died with the loss of his team, and then with Namikaze Minato barely 3 years later. But at the very least, Kakashi had the village to fall back on. And if Kurama has been on his own as a bounty hunter since Uzushio fell, Iruka doesn't even want to think about the mess that the man's head must be. Do you want to kiss him? The Chunin asks gently because really, that's one of the more important questions, and Kakashi is likely to overlook it entirely in his bewilderment. Just because you two got shoved into a situation like that doesn't particularly mean anything. Would you want to, even if Anko wasn't there to motivate you? Kakashi snorts, dragging a hand through his hair. Yes, he says eventually, sounding like it's being pulled out of him with torture. I would. Then just give him time. Let him know that you're interested, but you're not going to push him. Let him adjust to having a home again, and then maybe everything will work out for you. For both of you. With a sigh, Kakashi slides off the bed and stands, head cocked thoughtfully and expression distant. That simple? He asks, but before Iruka can answer, he shakes off the mood and turns on the Chunin with a bright smile. Thanks, Iruka-chan. As an expression of my gratitude, how might I set you up on a date with Hana? Or if you're just trying to get her attention, we could try writing it in the sky with fireworks. Oh! Iruka thinks he's entirely justified booting the jerk right out his bedroom window. It's only the 3rd floor after all. Naruto wakes to the sound of rain on his bedroom window and a breath of cool air on his toes. Sasuke's stolen the blankets, again, and is wrapped up like a caterpillar on Naruto's right. The only part of him that's visible is a shock of dark hair against the white of the pillow and the very tip of a pale nose. 3 weeks ago, Naruto would have yelled and snatched his blankets back, kicking Sasuke out of his bed and lorded the knowledge of him being a blanket hog over him at every possible turn. A month ago, had someone suggested that Naruto was familiar with Sasuke's sleeping habits, he'd have pranked them to Kingdom Come, and Sasuke too, for good measure. But now, 1 full month since his cousin suggested they live together, 2 weeks since Sasuke spent his first night at their place, where he's somehow spent the majority of his nights since, Naruto just rolls his eyes and slides out of bed, intending to find a few extra covers. He pads out the door, not turning on any lights to avoid waking his teammate, and slips into the hall heading for the linen closet. But there's a light on in the kitchen, and even though Naruto is fairly sure it's well past midnight, he pauses. No sound reaches him, though in a shinobi household that doesn't exactly mean anything, and the only noise is that of the rain outside. There's a draft, too, which is unusual. Kurama generally keeps everything tightly closed at night and warded with some particularly creative seals. Naruto only hesitates for another moment before making his decision and continuing past the closet. Carefully, he pushes open the kitchen door and steps in. The air smells faintly of green tea, and the window above the sink is open, the counter wet with a good amount of rain. Kurama is seated at the table, leaning on his crossed arms with his head bowed and his hair covering his face. A cup of tea is sitting in front of him, but there's no steam rising from it even in the cool room, and Naruto guesses that it's been there for a while. Kurama-ni? He asks softly, because while he may not be the most observant of people, he doesn't have to be incredibly sensitive to feel the sadness and confusion in the air. There's a pause, so long that Naruto half wonders if his cousin even heard him. But then Kurama lifts his head, offering a faint crooked smile that looks more like a grimace than anything. Naruto, he says, and it's probably the first time he's left Kun off the end in all the time they've been living together. Are you alright? It's late. Early, more like it, but Naruto doesn't answer, studying his cousin. Kurama is pale, almost unnervingly so, and even though he's looking right at Naruto, there's a distracted sort of distance in his eyes. Are you okay, Kurama-ni? He countered, clambering into the chair across from the redhead. Kurama looks startled as though the question is entirely unexpected, and he swallows once, hard, before looking down at his crossed arms again. He begins slowly. Right before he died, a very good friend asked me to do something for him. He made me promise, and I never break a promise, but... He pauses, expression very far away and eyes so incredibly sad that Naruto wants to leap out of his chair and give the man a hug to take even the smallest bit of that pain away. I don't know if I'll be able to keep my word this time, Naruto. Naruto watches his cousin for another moment, turning the problem over in his mind. He can imagine what it would be like, having to break a promise. And since he's got the same Nindo, he can understand just how much it would suck having to go back on something that you've built your whole life around. And to break a promise to a dead friend, even worse. Still, though, was your friend a really good friend? Naruto asks thoughtfully. Kurama glances up at him, expression flickering to surprise again before he nods. My best friend, he confirms. And you were his best friend too? He knew you really well? I was, and he did. There's no hesitation in the words. Naruto smiles up at his cousin, and it's not quite as wide or as bright as normal, because Kurama still looks so sad. But it's still there, and it makes something in Kurama's gaze soften. Then your friend probably knew how hard it was when he asked you, he points out. And even though he knew you weren't going to like it, and that it'd be really difficult, he asked you anyway. Doesn't that make doing it even more important? Kurama closes his eyes, and the expression on his face is somewhere between amusement, resignation, misery, and relief. And he'd expect me to go through with it, just because he asked, he murmurs, and then laughs faintly. When he opens his eyes, they're bright with something Naruto can't name. And I will, because he was the one who asked. Because he let me go, and he would expect me to let him go if something like this happened. He rubs his hand over his face, then rakes one through his hair, and when he looks up again, there's a smile on his face, soft and sweet as he meets Naruto's gaze. Reaching out, he ruffles Naruto's hair and leans forward to kiss his forehead. Thank you, Naruto. You're far smarter than me about these kinds of things. Thank you. Kurama smells like rain and matcha, and his hair is soft and silky where it brushes over Naruto's face. The kiss is something entirely new, and Naruto is frozen because he's seen parents do that, but only rarely. Affection, he thinks belatedly, even more than the normal level, and Naruto has dreamed of having a family with hugs and hair ruffles and fondness, but that's far closer to love. And no one has ever loved him before, not that they've shown in gestures or said in so many words. He swallows and looks up as his cousin comes to stand by his chair, a gentle smile on his face. Kurama-ni? He says helplessly. Kurama leans down and hugs him, wraps him in strong arms, and lets Naruto bury his face in citrus-sweet crimson hair. Another kiss is pressed to his forehead, and Kurama murmurs, I'm very, very lucky to have you in my life, Naruto. Thank you for everything you've given me. Don't cry! Naruto berates himself fiercely even as he feels his face screwing up to hold off the tears. Don't cry, stupid! It's nothing to be sad about! But maybe it is, because Naruto can't remember anyone ever thinking they were better off for knowing him. No one. Ever. But now Kurama does, and Naruto can't believe his luck in having such a cousin. He's just never thought that Kurama would feel the same, especially about him. Kurama pulls back just a little, and his smile has only gotten more brilliant. He sets a hand on Naruto's head and says gently, Now, why are you up, Naruto? You've got message tomorrow, right? Naruto makes a face, remembering Kakashi's promise of multiple D ranks as soon as they get done with the morning's training. Hopefully they won't have to catch the stupid demon Katora again. But Naruto's fairly certain their luck isn't anywhere near that good, Kurama as his cousin or not. Sasuke stole all the blankets, he tells the redhead. Are there any extras? Of course. He does start to do that, doesn't he? Kurama looks amused, and he stands back to let Naruto slide down from the chair. There. Then, like it's entirely natural, he takes Naruto's hand and walks him back to his room. Go on and get comfortable. I'll get them. Thanks, Kurama-ni, Naruto says obediently, slipping back through the door. Sasuke is still on the far side of the bed. Regardless of his status as a blanket, he's pretty fair about keeping their portions of the mattress equal. Kurama comes in just as he's getting settled, carrying a heavy quilt that Naruto recognizes from his cousin's own bed. He opens his mouth to protest, but Kurama smiles and cuts him off, spreading the blanket over him with a few gentle motions. Don't worry about it, Naruto, he whispers, just barely loud enough to hear. I've got a late patrol anyway, so I'll be leaving soon. Sleep well. Be careful, Kurama-ni. Naruto whispers back, not nearly as quiet even though he tries his best. Kurama ruffles his hair fondly, smooths down the blanket, pulls Sasuke's up a little higher, and then steals out of the room without a sound. Naruto watches him go, no longer nearly as sad, and with a new feeling of determination about him, and snuggles down into his pillow with a grin of his own. He helped! That's kind of amazing. Kurama is grateful for the distraction of patrol, slipping silently over the rooftops of Konoha in the slowly lightening darkness. His partner for this particular patrol, an unfamiliar Jonin Hyuga, is 3 streets ahead, though she's carefully keeping him within range of her Byakugan. In a world where sneak attacks are more common than straightforward ones, night patrols are always tense and serious, no matter how long Konoha's relative peace has lasted. He's glad for it, though, because keeping his mind focused as they check every corner and cranny of their route has kept his thoughts from creeping down other more emotionally fraught paths. Now, though, with false dawn just starting to touch the sky and the relief waiting by the gate, Kurama can't help but recall what's been driving him to avoidance for the last 6 hours. He'd wanted to kiss Kakashi. Had wanted it like breathing or gravity, a fact and nothing less. But even now, Sasuke is a hole inside of him, not just in his heart, but deeper, graver, cutting down to the very core of his being. His soul, he supposes, though that makes it sound far more romantic than it feels. Almost 6 o'clock, the Hyuga comments as they fall into step. She glances at him with a faint half smile. Right on time, then. Kurama smiles back, shutting his thoughts away for the moment. Quiet night, he agrees as they drop down into the street. Team 5? A soft voice calls as they approach the gate, and Izumo steps out of the shadows. Team 9, Kurama corrects, and it's probably one of the simplest codes. 9 for all clear, 8 for we were compromised, 6 for suspicious activity, and 4 for internal disturbances encountered. But it's worked since the Nidaime, and for a reason. Izumo nods in understanding the gesture to the next patrol forward. They salute as they slip past, bounding up to the rooftops as soon as they're clear, and then disappear into the gray half-light. Thank you, Hyuga-san, Uzumaki-san, the Chunin says cheerfully, heading back to his post at the gate. From inside the guard's outpost, Kotetsu gives a cheerful wave, and Kurama waves back. Have a good morning, Rui-san, he offers, inclining his head to his partner. You as well, Kurama-san, she responds, then turns on her heel and vanishes with a flicker of chakra and a whirl of leaves. Kurama hesitates, glancing back towards his apartment in the weak dawn that manages to break through the dispersing clouds. He could go back, say good morning to Naruto and Sasuke, but he feels restless and uncertain. Blowing out a soft sigh, he instead turns towards another familiar destination. But when he reaches the memorial stone, someone else is already there, a small and familiar figure. Kurama watches her for a moment before approaching, settling at her side with his eyes on the carved stone. Good morning, Sakura-chan, he murmurs. The kunoichi spares a glance to smile at him. Good morning, Kurama-san, she answers, before turning her attention back to the stone. I was just telling Kasumi-san about training the other day. The woman who inspired her, Kurama remembers. He tucks his hands into his pocket, eyes automatically finding his mother's name on the list. It's right below his father's, and several down from Obito's, a ways above Soma Kasumi's. All the names that Kurama wishes to mourn are absent, though, because those who bear them are still alive. Not his anymore. Not yet. I think she'd be proud of you. Kurama studies the name of this strange kunoichi who had such an impact on the girl beside him. You've started well, and you'll only get stronger from now on. Sakura looks calm and settled, at ease with herself. Kurama-san, can I ask you a question? Surprised, Kurama glances down at her. Of course, what is it? She hesitates, biting her lips, and then says softly, what does it feel like to be in love? Kurama swallows, closing his eyes. Of all the questions to ask, and all the times to ask it, but it's fine. She's curious, and maybe she's wondering about her crush. For that, Kurama will answer. Love is... He frowns faintly, gathering his thoughts. It's You go in with both eyes wide open, knowing that you're being stupid, knowing that you're a fool and that you're taking idiotic risks and that there's only the slimmest of all possible chances that anything will come of it. You've got no guarantee, no promises that can't be broken in an instant, and somehow it doesn't matter because for all of that you're drowning and it's incredible and you never want to come up for air. Kurama smiles helplessly, remembering what lasted through war and death and bloody tragedy, good even in the midst of an entire world ending. It hurts you and it hurts the one you love and you can't do anything about that, but you wouldn't even if you could, because you're never ever more alive than when feeling like that, even if it is pain and heartbreak and being closer to someone than was ever intended. That's what love feels like. It's stupid and agonizing and ridiculous, and you wouldn't have it any other way. And maybe he's biased. Maybe for some people, love is a kind and sweet and gentle thing. But Kurama has never wanted it to be that way for him. Can't imagine it, actually. If he's going to be consumed, to burn up and change and be reborn, he wants it to be something huge and vast and overwhelming, not a gradual and delicate difference. The silence lingers between them in the cool air, fresh with the recent rain and the birdsong rising to greet the coming sun. Sakura is considering his words. Her expression is thoughtful and calm, and her eyes are distant. She laces her fingers in front of her, turning her gaze back to the stone, and then says carefully, I don't think I'm in love with Sasuke-kun. Or not yet. I know his favorite food and his favorite color and fan club stuff. But I don't really know him. When Kakashi asked us about our dreams, he said his goal was to kill a certain man, and I don't know anything about why or that kind of thing. I don't know him. And even if I did, Kasumi always said that she was too busy being a kunoichi and training to have a boyfriend. If I want to be as good as Tsunade-sama, I'm going to have to work really hard, and I won't have time either. Her voice is sad, but not resigned, and Kurama can feel the steel within it. He wonders what he could say to that, so ridiculously mature compared to the fangirl she was just a few short weeks ago, and then offers, for what it's worth, I'm entirely certain that Ino isn't going to win his heart anytime soon either. Sakura laughs at that, bright and surprised. No, she agrees, giggling. From what I've seen, Sasuke doesn't care about hair unless it's falling in his eyes. So long or short or blonde is hardly going to matter to him. Maybe when hormones kicked in, but not right now. Very sensible, Kurama agrees, smiling, and this time the silence is warm and comfortable, regardless of the strengthening wind. What are you scared of, Kurama-san? Sakura asks, suddenly keeping her eyes on the monument. Love, Kurama answers in a moment of wry honesty. A beat. And then he corrects himself, or at least, love that ends badly. I like to think of myself as strong, but that kind of thing nearly destroyed me, and more than once. Losing Sasuke the first time, even if he hadn't known it was love at the time, battles and far too many near deaths for both of them, and then the first few months here, when the one thing that could possibly drag Kurama out of his grief was the thought of his mission, the mission he and Sasuke had invested everything in. Love has almost killed him enough times that he knows to be wary of it. Sakura looks thoughtful again when she glances back at him, and there's something firm and focused in her gaze. Just for a moment, Kurama can see a shadow of the woman he knew and lost to Madara, the brave and steady kunoichi that lies somewhere inside this little girl. Do you regret it? Falling in love, I mean. No, never. Kurama blurts before he can even think about it, and then pauses. It's true. He's never regretted loving Sasuke regardless of their end, and never while they were fighting either, no matter how hard their lives became. Sasuke, at the very least, is one area where Kurama simply can't have regrets. The kunoichi smiles at him, warm and encouraging, and she looks brilliant in the dawn, as though someone has lit a fire within her heart and its light is escaping through her skin. Don't you think, she says, reaching up to hold her pink hair out of her eyes as the wind gusts past them, that makes it all worthwhile? Maybe no matter how it ends, or even how it starts, the real point to falling in love is being in love. It's not a path to somewhere else. It's the destination. It's the point. Whatever happens afterwards, you still feel love and were loved, and isn't that enough? For the second time in less than half a day, a child has managed to render him speechless. Kurama stares at her, wide-eyed and a little breathless, and he's never thought of it that way. But in his life, with its clearly marked endpoints and the loss of so many before he decided to start all over again, those simple words somehow make it 100 times better. "You're very clever," he says admiringly, offering her a small smile in return. "Whoever you fall in love with is going to be very, very lucky, Sakura." She didn't have time for love before. Not in his timeline with Obito and then Madara again. Only her crush on Sasuke, which settled into a strong and solid friendship without any interference from Kurama. But then now, Kurama is willing to give so very much, so very close to everything, for her to have the chance to find someone she feels is worthy of her heart. Sakura blushes at his words, and in that instant, she's a child again, too wise for her 12 years of life, and not yet grown into herself. "You really think so?" she asks shyly, tucking her hair behind her ears. She's beaming, though, beautiful in the dawn, and Kurama smiles back. "Yes," he says, entirely honest and glad to be. "Yes, Sakura, I do."